Good evening. We'll call this regular meeting of Prince Rupert City Council to order for Monday, May 14th, 2012. I'll ask Council's consideration of the adoption of the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is there any discussion? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. The agenda is adopted. There are a variety of sets of minutes here tonight. I'll ask Council's consideration of the adoption. First are the minutes of the Special Committee of the whole meeting of April 16th, 2012, and the recommendation is they be received. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Thorkelson. Is there any errors or omissions? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. They're received. Next are the minutes of the special meeting of April 23rd, and the recommendation is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Are there any errors or omissions? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. Next are the minutes of the regular meeting of April 23rd, 2012, and they come with a recommendation that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Garon. Are there any errors or omissions? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those are adopted. Next are the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 23rd with the recommendation that they be received. And these minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting are different than the Special Committee of the Whole meeting. The recommendation is they be received. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Garon. Are there any errors or omissions? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those are received. Next are the minutes of the special meeting of April 30th with the recommendation that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Are there any errors or omissions? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. And the last set of minutes are for a special committee of the whole meeting of April 30th, 2012, with the recommendation that they be received. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Garon. Are there any errors or omissions? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are received. Congratulations, Mr. Gradecki. There's 6 sets of minutes there with no errors or omissions. But I'll read them again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Next on the agenda are petitions and delegations, and tonight we have a presentation from the Prince Rupert Port Authority. It involves Mr. Andrew Hamilton, the Director of Business Development, Mr. Steve McFarlane, who is a principal, and Mr. Nick Foster, who is associate with McFarlane Bigger Architects and Designers. It works a little bit better for me if I get it further away from me. And it's regarding the Prince Rupert Port Authority Cow Bay Development Vision. I would invite you to please make yourselves comfortable at the microphones here. There is a grayish-green button on the microphone which you would press. That will allow people that are watching on television to understand and hear your presentation. If you'd like to please come forward. By the way, we appreciate you being here this evening. Thank you for taking time to come. Are you Mr. McFarlane?
Yes, I am.
Your first time in Prince Rupert?
No.
Okay, so you know the weather's always like this, but we keep it to ourselves. Okay, as long as you understand that. Good evening. Thank you for coming, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you the Cow Bay Lands Development Vision. This development vision is focused on a couple of port properties down in Cow Bay, as well as 2 properties that the port has intentions of acquiring from the city of Prince Rupert. And so this is the fundamental focus of the work that OMB, or the Office of McFarlane Biggers, has done for us. That said, one of the main focuses of this development is not just the buildings and the building sites themselves, but really trying to look at the development in a much more holistic way and trying to consider the public spaces or community spaces that could be sort of accommodated. One of the things that we acknowledge that this is an important area in the city of Prince Rupert. It's where the city in many ways sort of started. It's been sort of a center point of the economy here, and there's a lot of meaning and within the population here, and that was something that we sort of recognized at the outset of this development, and we realized that in order for it to be a successful development, we want to incorporate the needs and desires of the community. So we started this process with a needs assessment, where we went out to different stakeholders groups to help have them provide us with information which would direct our development vision and really sort of give us some sort of insight into how we would approach this development. And so with that, we sort of gathered the information and then passed it on to the architectural firm OMB. And with that, I'll sort of hand it over to Steve and Nick for them to give you their presentation of what they've sort of created for us.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay, thanks very much, Andrew. And yeah, first of all, just to introduce ourselves, Nick Foster, I brought from our office here. Nick's an associate with our office, and I'm Steve McFarlane. I'd like to just start off by just saying how tremendously grateful we've been being involved in the project. We found we're new to Prince Rupert, but we found the community to be just exceptionally welcoming and an incredibly sort of rich and diverse history and culture here that we've been just tremendously appreciative of our involvement. So I have I understand I've got about 15 minutes, so I've kept our presentation fairly brief. We're going to be working through kind of an overview of several months of work, so it is at fairly high level, and I would certainly welcome your questions after we're finished. The challenge that we were presented with initially from the port and Andrew and his team was a really interesting one. It's quite simple, and we were asked to just define a development vision for the Cow Bay lands. At the outset, I guess we sort of created a series of sort of measures of success, which were to create a meaningful and vibrant nucleus for the residents, visitors, and businesses alike, improve community access to the water, and then identify the development potential of the sites available to the port. Andrew's already described briefly the sort of outreach process, and we definitely have to commend the Port Authority for, I think, organizing and implementing just a really meaningful and sincere sort of outreach program. We've met with several sort of community advisory groups and received all of the information from the port, and it's about an 18-page document or something like that that summarizes some of those early outreach issues. The word cloud that's sort of presented here is really just designed to sort of highlight some of the key issues that came forward in that, and it's sort of a simple quasi-scientific tool that we've used on several occasions. It really just gives the greater the size of the word, the more emphasis on the content. Another thing we did at the outset of the project was just sort of create a series of guiding principles. This is really before we had really started to get our teeth into the problem here. We started by just looking at other really good examples of sort of vibrant waterfront district development communities and extracted from them sort of 6 essential qualities that we thought would be a good measure, or really create a meaningful lens to sort of view the Cow Bay Development Lands project through. First and foremost is a notion around creating public space and combining that with some ideas about vehicles and cars and traffic calming. And we'll explain a little bit more about this as we go forward, but it's really a key principle in the design that we're going to propose tonight. Mixed uses, another really key consideration. Buildings that combine multiple uses under one roof is definitely a key towards creating sort of vibrant and rich communities. The other thing that helps animate that, of course, is day and night activities not excluded to or exclusive to daytime use only, but also activities that are occurring year-round, not seasonally limited either. We think what's really important in meaningful communities is developing an authentic sense of place as we call it, and that's really trying to capture the fundamental essence of communities through the way buildings are built or the public realm is arranged. And unique to Prince Rupert, I think, is the opportunity for accessible waterfront activity. There's a really rich and sort of vibrant set of things that goes on there now. We think there's the capacity to enhance those things tremendously, and providing some access to that, I think, is a key thing. Of course, all of these principles taken together are meaningless ultimately if there isn't sort of good management and planning in behind it. And that's not really an architectural or urban design issue. It's more an issue related to just creating opportunities for events, inventing new opportunities, seeing where the potential is, and really having this sort of administrative drive, if you will, to enhance the vibrancy of the community. Excellent, thanks. So the study itself is I'm just going to use this pointer here. The study itself is, we really sort of took a broad view of the scope of the study. We were asked to sort of look carefully at these sites, but we knew to really bring a meaningful solution to these sites, we needed to sort of cast our net a little bit wider. So we've taken it out to the, to the far edge of the Metlakatla docks here, and then all the way through into, eastern Cow Bay. It's, I think, important to note, too, that one of the critical things for us is just understanding how this part of the community relates back to other parts of Prince Rupert, namely the downtown, 3rd Avenue, and 1st Avenue. There's 3 sites under consideration indicated here, and in the sort of first blush of our analysis, we came up with really some highlights of some strengths and weaknesses that we felt were critical to address in the design proposal. The strengths, of course, are just the unique qualities of the area. It has that sort of special and characteristics that aren't found anywhere else in the town. It's definitely an active waterfront, which we think is important to enhance even further. And the authentic industrial character that exists there now, whether it's through existing industrial buildings or converted uses in other older industrial buildings, I think is quite a strength. On the weakness side, we think there's a real emphasis on the vehicle at the expense, I think, of the pedestrian or public realm. It's somewhat exposed and barren, primarily through the absence of trees and soft landscaping and this type of thing. So those are things that we've started to address in our proposal. One of the other ways that we look at sort of creating something that's uniquely meaningful to Prince Rupert and the waterfront is understanding the way buildings have been built through the past. We know that there's a tremendously rich sort of industrial built heritage, so we did sort of embark on a study to look at these things carefully and try and extract some essential qualities that would start to formulate a suggested way of building and making architecture on the waterfront. It's not meant to be a definitive solution by any means. It's meant to be a sort of a generalized approach that starts to be meaningful and creating places. Next slide. The intent, of course, is not to recreate the past. It's really just to learn from lessons from the past and allow them to inform an attitude towards building that's based in the future, in the present day. It's really, contemporary buildings embodying the boldness and spirit and simplicity of the historic waterfront structures without falling into sort of replication of historic buildings has been our emphasis. Similarly, in the area character, this is a term we would describe to, or use to describe the public realm. Our focus is on really looking to sort of best practices in an urban design world in order to infuse, a real sense of quality and meaningfulness into Cow Bay. We think it's really important to sort of use these elements to tell the story of the community. We think there's several ways that can be done through both design and detailing and the introduction of public art and that type of thing. Several other sort of key elements would focus on waterfront access, the introduction of special features that start to really highlight Cow Bay as a unique area in the city, distinctive from other parts of the city. Again, this to underscore the value of street trees and the sort of relationship between vehicles and pedestrians to happily coexist is part of our thinking here. And as well as a sort of introduction of more soft landscaping and such. On the master plan itself, I mean, perhaps the most critical thing to point out in this drawing is that the red elements drawn in here indicate new mixed-use buildings that embrace a sort of full range of building uses, be it community, commercial, or retail, or cultural uses as well. We're proposing to extend really complete the wharf structure west of the Atlan Terminal building, and through to the Odin Wharf that's there now. We're proposing the introduction of some buildings along here, buildings where the existing parking area is across from the Atlan, and then a sort of centralized building here that's positioned where the triangular grassy area is right now. Unifying all of these elements is a redefined public realm that stretches. We're suggesting it could ultimately begin here, stretching through and connecting all of these buildings all the way out in through to here. Our study acknowledges the discussions we've had with the city regarding a potential Third Avenue extension. It's by no means dependent on that happening, but it would certainly be enhanced if that plan was to come into play. The reason primarily is it allows this bridge here to be converted to a pedestrian bridge potentially and taken out of service for vehicles. And we understand that it's near the end of its life. Central to the sort of heart and soul of the project is this area here, and it's a little difficult to see on the slides, but what we're proposing there is an open public waterfront gathering place that's protected. It's sheltered from the rain, but open to views to the water, and really becomes a sort of redefined heart and soul of the Cow Bay community down here. It's animated by the uses of these buildings adjacent as well as the buildings across the way, and provides some tremendous flexibility in how this area can be used. In terms of just sort of vehicular access, it's really very similar to what you experience there now, with a few key changes. One is that we're proposing here we would introduce a four-way stop as part of a traffic calming measure, so that we can really bring the vehicle speeds down in here to the greatest degree possible. We're proposing some significant changes in the attitude towards the width of the roads, in that we're trying to narrow the roads again to turn reduce the speeds of cars as they make their way through there. And also proposing a change in the surface of the roads so that they're not asphalt surfaces. We're proposing a textured surface, say like you might achieve using pavers or something such as that. So it really does have an enormous influence on the way vehicles make their way through here. We've built in this area the capacity for vehicles to come through, but also for this road to be potentially closed off so that it can be a forum for larger public events, community gathering events, events such as that, and can
you point that road out again, please?
It's right in through here. This one here.
Thank you. Where the buses are now.
Where the buses are now. That's correct. Yeah. And what we've done in terms of dealing with the buses is actually proposed. We've introduced this sort of vehicular turnaround, fairly large-scale turnaround here that allows buses to sort of enter the district, pick up passengers in the case of the cruise being in the harbor, carry on through here, and then depart. So it does simplify tremendously the vehicular movement through the area.
And that turnaround would be approximately at what we call the foot of McBride Street?
Approximately, yeah, just below the museum, just below the crest. Okay. Next. So there's some, we're at very early stages in terms of design. It is very it's at the concept stage, so it's just illustrative of some notions at this point. What this is showing is really a focus on the community gathering space. We're proposing really a sort of a high canopy that has a translucent material to allow the daylight to come in, but shelter this area from rain and snow and the like. It's sized to sort of incorporate, to be resilient enough to address large-scale crowds as well as be appropriately scaled for smaller gatherings. Here we happen to be depicting, say, if there was a hockey game going on, that might be an event organized around that, or other sports activities, or anything of the sort. We do really see it as the heart and soul of the sort of newly defined Cow Bay. Provides weather protection. It does create some opportunities for enhancing the cruise and tour operations that are underway and planned. More importantly, though, we see it as creating a kind of front porch, if you will, to the Prince Rupert community, creating a sort of community portal that is an opportunity to sort of express and convey the sort of the history and the ecology and the culture of the region. We see it really as a multi-purpose activity venue. We can imagine anything from, organizing Boy Scout, Cub Scout Apple Day, or parades or music events or other gatherings of the type, reinstating Cow Bay Days or something like that. And in that sense, it really becomes a community showcase. I think coupled with this idea of well-planned events, it can embrace all factions of the community and be a really vibrant place. This is a view that's taken in front of, this is the existing Atlan Terminal building here. These are the proposed sort of generalized forms of the new development on the other side of the street. It's showing really one of the fundamental aspects of our plan is this change from vehicle emphasis to pedestrian emphasis. It's difficult to see in these, and we do have hard copies that we can leave with you of our proposal. This is the current situation here. You can see sort of wide streets, diminished sort of opportunities for pedestrians here. What we're proposing is something much more like this, a curbless environment where pedestrians and vehicles, including delivery vehicles and this type of thing, can happily coexist and create a rich and vibrant opportunity for business. We're very conscious of the parking issue down there, and our proposal addresses that. Right now, I think there's about 170 parking spaces available. This proposal, even with the additional buildings that are brought to the site, proposes 250 parking spaces. A lot of that is dealt with by parallel parking along the street edges here, as well as some more clustered parking that's just in behind this building here.
Will that be residential rentals on top of those buildings?
Are
they being done for that?
We're not proposing residential at this time. It seems like there's generally enough interest in the community for commercial, retail, and cultural activities that would seem like a suitable build out. The residential densities, I think, would be not significant enough to bring all of the benefits that residential could bring. And we understand from our discussions with planning that there's other residential development opportunities that surround the periphery of the site that would still create the opportunity to infuse some energy in here, we think, in the fullness of time. So this is a view from bird's eye view from out over the harbor, and it's I think it's an introduction to an animation that we have that we'll just need to open up a separate slide. There's a bit of a fly through of just what we're imagining. It starts to address some of the building form issues, gives you a better indication of a sketch really of the public realm that we're imagining, and starts to illustrate what this sort of community gathering space and the potential it has on the waterfront. So here we are moving down past the Atlan Terminal. This is the community gathering space here, carrying on through to the existing industrial uses at the end of the road, back up into the air here, and and flying down through the streets again. More of a community and commercial multi-use building, mixed-use building on the left, and back out into the sky. And this will loop through. We can stop it at any point. One of the things we're trying to do with the building forms is actually acknowledge a couple of things. Acknowledge the shape and form of the museum, as well as giving the development an interesting roofscape, because it is quite visible from the park above. The roof really becomes a sort of fifth elevation, if you will, and we felt it was important to create some visual interest there, while at the same time sort of reducing the scale of the three-story buildings down to something that sits nicely adjacent to the existing two-story buildings, and also gives us the opportunity to scale the buildings, particularly at this end, where they're adjacent, sort of smaller, more intimate buildings such as Cappuccino's and the other cluster of commercial uses there now. That really concludes our presentation. That's a sort of high-level overview of what we've been up to for the last few months, and again, we're tremendously excited about the potential of the project. It's been incredibly rewarding for our office to be involved with it, and we're very appreciative.
Thank you very much for the presentation. With the high-level activity, it looks very clean. Are there any questions from members of council? Councillor Ashley.
Well, thank you for your presentation. It definitely looks wonderful. I do have some questions. I won't say concerns, because I'm sure that there are things that have come up. But when we've had discussions about this before, we've talked about other cruise ship type destination areas, such as Ketchikan or those sorts of things, where you have sort of ghost town type things happening when the cruise ships go. And I'm just wondering, because I was a little bit surprised to hear that there wasn't any residential, because we'd had some talk, or we'd heard that there might be, and I'm just and we have a lot of, I guess, empty office space in town. So I'm wondering, what sort of things that have been considered in terms of trying to see that doesn't happen in this area.
Mr. Stevenson, good evening.
I think one of the key things to reiterate from earlier is this isn't being driven by any clear single-purpose pursuit of the cruise business. This is actually informed by what the community values that were conveyed to Andrew and the group through all the consultation with all these stakeholder groups. And we really see this as a community development that's focused on year-round Prince Rupert activities. But at the same time, it creates great capacity and improves our waterfront for handling tourists, whether arriving by cruise ship or not.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Thorkelson.
I'm not an architect, nor do I pretend to know much about architecture, so I just want to make sure but I worked down at that Atlan building for years. What I'm wondering is it almost looks like it's a tunnel going down that street when you run the video kind of thing. And I was wondering, is it possible to do something to those buildings to make them look less mountainous, less
like an alpine village?
Well, I mean, if you go down there, it looks just really like an industrial site, right? I mean, really, it does with a long wall, and it's sort of like probably the least architecturally pleasing building to my mind in town, which is the Zellers building, right? Because of that big long walk without much of a break. And I was wondering, is it possible to zigzag those buildings in so that it doesn't look just like one? I just hate to see it look like just like a long industrial tunnel. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I mean, the way that the buildings are drawn right now is very conceptual. It's meant to be just a sort of generalized overview of what the buildings will be. But some of the qualities that aren't captured in a really early sketch like this are the elements that are transparent in the buildings. And I think that's one thing that's really important to acknowledge, is that at the ground plane, there'll be a high degree of transparency, which will definitely help break up that sort of wall-like treatment that you're reading right now. There's quite a bit of relief in terms of the building elevation right now. We're proposing to have some sort of deep setbacks to create some rain protection. And so the buildings are sort of a combination of setting forth and setting back as you make your way down through here. We've kind of de-emphasized the trees in the drawing just to let the buildings become more prevalent. But the reality is those trees would actually have a much more significant role to play in terms of breaking down that apparent wall-like character. And that would be true whether the trees are in bloom or in leaf or in bloom or free of leaves. They still become sort of significant forms in the landscape. So I think we're confident that the combination of the sort of transparent elements and the relief in the building facades and the landscaping, as well as there's other street furniture too that we would consider around, benches and lampposts and things to deal with garbage and all those kinds of things. I think in the fullness of time, as the scheme develops, those things will become, more meaningful and will be represented in a more meaningful way, truthfully, in how we depict the areas. Yes.
Councillor Garon and then Councillor Ashley.
Thank you for your presentation. It looks like it's going to be a nice asset to the community when it comes to fruition. I've always said in order to get people drawn into that area, you need a corridor, and I like your corridor. In regards to parking, you say 250 parking spaces. So exactly where are those going?
Well, they're really spread out throughout the whole district. It's if I could get a visual here, I could point it to you with the laser here. There's a significant cluster that's. Do we have it here? Sorry, just bear with us here. Yeah, here, this is good. So we looked at the whole area and there's an existing parking study that gave us the initial data that looked at this parking capacity of this whole area, and that established 170 spaces in the current condition. That includes this lot down here. It included this lot, included any of the street parking opportunities and other things down and through here. We've more or less deployed parking in the same areas. We've just been more efficient with it. We've just been a bit more clever in how it's planned. There's not a radical shift in the approach at all. We're still capitalizing on the opportunity of this lot here. We've added a building to the parking lot site, but we've also clustered almost as much parking as there currently in behind between the Eagle Cliff and the building itself. It's just much more efficiently planned, so we get a sufficient number in there. And then there's certainly curbside parallel parking throughout both sides of the street, as well as up through here, and along and through here, and including some, again, more structured, more dedicated, more organized parking down near the docks at this end.
Have you factored in that when we have log ships in town, that there's sometimes 200 people working out on if there's 3 log ships out there, there's quite a crew of people out there, so parking in the downtown core also becomes a problem. Have you factored that into there?
We also know from our discussions with the city that there's another potential project underway over here that also adds in terms of parking capacity. I'm not sure the numbers.
Right. Thank you. Councillor, no, you're fine. Are there any further questions? Not. Thank you very much for coming down here again this evening. I appreciate you sharing this with the council and, of course, with the community at large.
Thank you very
much. We'll take some of those hard copies that you offered, if you would, please. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Next is a presentation from Mr. Irving Figg. Mr. Figgs is representing the United Fishermen and Allied Workers Union, and it's regarding employment insurance and the herring fishery. Mr. Figgs, if you'd please come forward. Good evening to you. Thank you for coming to Prince Rupert City Council meeting. Please make yourself comfortable there. There's a grayish-green button on the mic there, and that'll allow people at home to hear what you have to say as well as see you.
Well, thank you first for the opportunity to address you, Mr. Mayor, and the City Council here. It's refreshing for me to have the opportunity to talk to some people that really are familiar with the commercial fishery and understand the value that it can bring to a community. My 35 years in the Lower Mainland, when I talk to people and they think about the commercial fishery, if they rarely do think about it, they just think that, geez, it's all over, isn't it? Or there's not much of it there, and they don't have any idea of what an economic driver it can be and still is to a large degree in many places. In particular, people here will be aware of the industry and how much it contributes to the community. The union's forever working on ways to try to increase the amount of fisheries we have, the amount of volume that we're allowed to catch, because the more we catch, the more we process, the more our people work, the more revenue flows through this city and it flows through other coastal communities in BC. As you're aware, the last 15 to 20 years haven't been all that great in the commercial industry. Most recently, you've all noticed that Royal Plant is closing here in Prince Rupert, given the recent consolidation with Canadian Fish and Ocean Fishing Company. These kind of restructurings are always difficult. However, we do remain hopeful that Canadian Fish will continue with some of the types of work that have been available for our workers off-season in the winter in the past few years, and with combined assets of the two companies, that can increase so that people may have an opportunity sooner or later to work more than just sporadically throughout the various seasons through the year. We're very appreciative of the City Council in Prince Rupert for supporting the commercial fishing industries and supporting the union in the commercial fisheries and many social issues over the years. I'd particularly like to thank you for the last couple of years, your efforts and ours with this delisting roe herring on the commercial the export control list. While I'd like to say we've been successful in stopping that, we have not. However, it wasn't a full-scale let's delist this right now. That decision has been moved off till next year and perhaps the year after that. They've relaxed some rules at this time, and there hasn't been too much of a jump right at it automatically to remove that fish out of here. We've only had herring roe processing in Prince Rupert since we negotiated it back since 2009, and to lose it already, markets come and markets go, but once you lose the processing capacity, it rarely, if ever, does it come back. I'm here tonight basically just to ask for your help again, and this is around employment insurance. As you're all aware, many workers in this town in the fishing industry and other industries work on a seasonal basis, and when they're not in their primary jobs, they try to pick up some work somewhere else, but that too can be sporadic at best, and many of them are underemployed. And over the last few years, given the most recent financial crisis, there have been some pilot projects within EI to try to make life a little better for these people that are forced to be on claims. It seems that the federal government, though, in the last year, the minister has decided the recession is over and it's time to be more concerned about deficit spending, and we've got to stop that. And it doesn't matter what we do, we're going to do something, we're going to stop it. So, of course, they look at EI immediately. Surpluses in EI, of course, get to go to general revenue, and it's a handy way to increase the revenue side for a finance minister, in my opinion. What they've done and what they're doing with this budget, it's in there, is three of the pilot projects. One was that you got to count your 14 best weeks when you establish your claim rather than counting the weeks immediately before your layoff. In the fishing industry and many other seasonal industries, typically before your layoff, your weeks go down to less earnings, and so that gives you a small claim. Well, this pilot project allowed you to count the best 14 in the previous year, and then you establish your claim, which gives you a better claim, better payout per week. In addition, people have been encouraged to look for alternate work, and they have. So there's been an incentive. This incentive was put in at 40%. You could earn 40% of what your weekly claim was and have that exempted and still get your regular claim. After that, if you earn more than that, say I earn $400 in a month, the first 40%, $180 or whatever, I could earn that $180 and still get my $400 in a week. Excuse me, I'm talking weeks here. Now they've dropped that down to 25%. And finally, the third one is they extended the period that you could be on claim for by 5 weeks, and that extension will be finished September, according to this budget. We've had, and to make it a little more personal, we've had one of our members has done a calculation, and I'm so impressed on how he did this on his last year of work, on how this really affects him personally, to make it personal, on someone who works at a fish plant, works the peak season, works every hour he can get there, and then he has another job that he goes to that's also part-time. And between the two, he manages to earn $12,000 a year, a little over $12,000 a year, which, with these pilot projects in place for the last few years, have allowed him an EI claim of $300 and some odd a week. I think it's about $360 a week. Okay? Now, with the stroke of a pen, they want to take these pilot projects away, which if you don't get the best 14 weeks, he estimates, and I think he's right looking at his numbers from last year, that instead of a claim of $360 a week, he'll now only get $250 a week, right? Not even. And when his other part-time job, which might be a day this week, and it might be 2 weeks from now, or a half a day over there, he was getting an exemption of $146 a week that he could earn, right, before they took away his EI. Now that drops all the way down to $63. Sum total of it is the guy's going to lose $200 a week just from these changes to these pilot projects. And we're talking $200 a week, $800 a month. It's a difference between being able to pay some bills, and have some decent food on the table. I mean, the guy is doing what government and these programs are all about, trying to put together enough income in a year that he can get by, and going out and picking up a second job and doing all the things that are being encouraged to do, and they've just decided that the recession is over, so I'm sorry, but you're the guy that's going to have to pay. And we don't think that's fair. We think it's criminal. We think it's just why any government would choose to, and this is not going to save a lot of money, but choose to make those efforts to control what many of us consider a deficit that's not out of control, off the backs of people like that. So I would hope that Council and you, Mr. Mayor, would see fit to support us with the letter to the Minister, not to make these changes at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fig, for your presentation. I'll ask the Council if there's any questions of you. I have a few myself, but it's my habit to let the Council go first, and then we'll see whether or not the Council wishes to support this. I suspect they do. Many of us at one point in our lives were members of the United Fishermen and Allied Workers Union and remember what this community meant to the fishing industry and the variety of fisheries that we had here. Are there any questions from members of Council? Councillor Thorkelson.
I just want to let everybody know that lots of people think that I'm the spokesperson for the union, and on the North Coast that's correct. But Irv is the president of the union. He's my boss, and I want to thank him for coming to town today to talk about with the workers tomorrow. We're having a meeting tomorrow night and about the merger and what the impacts are going to be, and also coming to Council to address this important issue. This issue is of huge importance to our members, and we're thankful to have a president who is able to make those kind of commitments of trying to change legislation that impacts our workers, not just with union business. So thank you, Irv, for coming up and doing this.
Mr. Fig, being Councillor Thorlickson's boss, you have my admiration, sir.
Tough job.
Are there any other
Somebody's got to do it.
Are there any other questions from members of council? Certainly, Councillor Rice.
I don't have any questions, but I actually would like to make a motion.
Certainly, please do.
I think you said you had questions first.
Certainly. I was going to ask you whether or not you believe that at some point going forward, the Government of Canada and the other parties, the official opposition and the third party, would support ocean ranching. We see that as a very, very strong initiative up in southeast Alaska, and having those annual harvest levels on ocean ranched fish takes the peaks and valleys out of the season and allows people to enjoy a longer season and, of course, make a better living.
Well, I'm not aware of what the opposition and the Conservative Party is at on that. I know how important it can be, and I know how important it has been in Alaska. And from a union perspective, at our most recent convention before last, we do support trying these methods to see if we can improve returns and improve the amount of fish that comes through our coastal waters, so that we can at least get some work off them. Of course we do. I'm not aware of what the government's intention is at this time, though.
Thank you. Can you tell us how this most recent herring season went and where the price is at?
Oh, herring was just, as far as I know, no one's talking about price right now. Of course, we didn't fish much Gulf seine in the south, a 6,000-ton quota, and I don't think they did. They did around 3. About half of it was taken. Some people are gnashing together their teeth about you're going to lose money on it. I don't think anybody has at this time. Not much has been exported around, as far as I'm aware. Price. You never can put your finger on what the price is paid to the license holder, okay? We've never been able to do that. We can only put our finger on what we negotiate. It's as simple as that.
I was thinking
There are
more
Christmas cards.
More the price to the buyers.
Oh, to the company?
Yeah.
What the company's paid for it?
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm unaware of what they paid their license holders. Like I said, that's
the 25 million sockeye that came to the Fraser. Are you ever aware of any findings as to how that much fish, what they believe created that?
Yeah, from what I've read so far, I mean, it's my humble opinion, and I'm not even a fisherman, but I've been around this for 35 years, is that the spawn for once was about the right amount. We got a lot of grief 4 years before then, that there was not enough fish went up. Not enough fish. Well, it appeared that evidently the proper amount went up for a change. Okay? And 18 months later, when the little guys come out, they were healthy for a change. They were good size. In addition, Carr was able to enforce that following some of the fish farms on the way up through Discovery Channel, on off the side there, that a lot of fish go through. That happened at the same time, although also the applications of slice on the fish farms for lice control were done what appears to be at the proper time, and there was a good food source out in the ocean at that particular time. The stars line up if you do it all. I mean, I think it's a classic case of finally doing all the right things together, and by God, those fish will come back. I mean, I'm just so happy that I was alive to actually be able to see this happen, a run that we haven't seen since, I don't know when it was, 50 years ago or so. There might have been a run that was close to that and only one. So I believe that's what's responsible for it, and I'm not as negative as everybody else about what's going to happen this year. I think we may be in the same kind of position in the South. I'm not familiar with the North. Joy knows better than I do about the North on the Skeena, but my experience on the Fraser, I think 4 years ago, I think everybody said we don't have enough fish up there. We don't have enough fish up there. But that's from that old attitude of send as many fish up there as you possibly can, and we're bound to get fish back. I think that's been proven false. I hope.
Thank you for your information.
You're welcome.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you for your presentation. I do remember that run being really beneficial for Prince Rupert because the fish plants weren't able to sort of process all that fish, and we actually kind of reaped the benefits by putting our shore workers to work here. And so I'd like to see more days like that. I think it's also it's tempting for us to actually talk about the fishing industry as a done industry, or it was something that contributed to our community. And I think it's important to highlight that it still contributes to our community. It's still doing so, that it's not gone. And I don't ever want to say it's not gone yet, because fish are a renewable resource, and I think we forget that. So when they are taken care of, they do come back year after year, and they provide for us. So to quote you, by God, they come back. Is that what you said? Most likely, I hope. Adding that, I would like to propose that the City of Prince Rupert send a letter to Minister Finley acknowledging the success of the pilot projects that Mr. Fig has just outlined for us, and request that they be further extended.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kinney. Is there any discussion? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. Thank you very much, Mr. Fig. It's very good to meet you. I hope we get to see you again during the years. Councillor Rice, you wanted to make a motion regarding a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So staying with petitions and delegations, I would actually like to make a motion that we allow for citizen resident Mr. Ken Shaw to actually present to Council tonight.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Rice, seconded by Councillor Ashley, that we allow a additional presentation this evening to Mr. Ken Shaw. The motion is made pursuant to the Council's procedure bylaw. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion passes. Good evening, Mr. Shaw. If you'd like to come forward, sir, make yourself comfortable there. When you're ready to speak, the grayish-green button on the microphone. And yes, I believe we do have it. Before you speak, though, if you'd like, pardon me, I have it. Perhaps the others don't. Yeah. I believe the others have digital copies. But certainly, if there's anybody at the council table needs a copy. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Shaw. If you'd, some people aren't as easy to speak publicly, so if you like, get yourself a glass of water there if you think you're going to dry up at some point.
Hey, thank you, Your Honor.
As a teacher, I suppose you're well practiced, are you?
I've been off for 2 weeks, so I might croak up here. Thank you for allowing me to speak. When you see the time, if you've looked at the timelines in my little short report here, you'll see why it was necessary to come this evening. I'm here to speak on with respect to the Pinnacle Pellet Plant environmental assessment. Screening document that has just been released. The notice was in the paper on Friday. The document wasn't available over the weekend from their website as it was damaged. So as of this morning, it's fully available on their website and the library and here to the public. I'm concerned about how quickly the assessment is being rushed through, and that the community will not be able to actually really assess and fully discuss the implications of this. So I've only had barely a day to go through the report and do a bit of background research. So what I wanted to do today was just try to highlight some issues for you and then ask you to publicly request the port to extend that consultation period. The next council meeting is the day before the public meeting. So first of all, there's some very time-sensitive deadlines. As I've mentioned, the information is only fully available as of today. We've got a long weekend coming up, and May 29th is the open house and public meeting, and final comments by June 5th. I'd like to quote Leroy Rietzma, president of Pinnacle Renewable Energy Corp., in an article that was in the paper and also reprinted in the Canadian Biomass magazine, committing to a substantial period of community consultation in response to some of the concerns that were raised in January. So my concern is, given those timelines, I don't think that we're entering a phase of substantial community consultation. A quick review of some of the issues with pellet storage facilities. This is a relatively young industry. First of all, there's off-gassing issues. There have been numerous deaths in the industry. There's been a fair bit of research that's begun in 2007, a partnership between the Canadian Biomass Association and UBC to try and figure some of this out. There's heating and potential for spontaneous combustion. This is biomass with a moisture content. It's just another form of composting. And there have been quite a few fires. The most recent one happened in February in London, England. And according to the articles I read, that particular fire required 120 firefighters to respond, and also the use of foam, as apparently the water was exacerbate the problem. They described it as a very technically difficult fire. As well, there's explosions from dust. As well, dust contains molds and allergens as well. And as has been recently in the media, the explosion in Burns Lake and the Prince George fires have brought to light a number of other lesser-known incidences, including an explosion that went unreported to WorkSafe BC at the Armstrong BC Pinnacle facility. Now, as part of that special, $27.50 per 100,000 tax rate that the grant that the city will be providing fire protection as they do to other port facilities. Now, if this was out in Ridley Island, I don't think there'd be too much concern, but we're right adjacent to a residential area, and so we should be doubly concerned. As well, I understand you're continuing work on the waterfront development plan, and that has been proceeding, although I understand that substantial meetings with the port have not yet happened. The proposal calls for the whole Westview Terminal site to be fully fenced, and the designated access to the facility will be along George Hill Ways and the waterfront. So we see the waterfront transforming there. And also in the paper, CN has advertised recently and has recruited a permanent constable for the Prince Rupert area. So we can see access to the CN lands that people typically walk their dogs on and things. We can see that closing down even further. So with all these timelines, this project getting through, by the time we get to the waterfront development plant, I don't know if there'll be much left to discuss with respect to the waterfront, sort of the east of Quinnipiac Station. Lots of good stuff, as we've heard tonight, west of Quinnipiac Station, down in Cow Bay. But that other part of the waterfront, which is used quite significantly, will not occur. So I think that waterfront development plan will be kind of hamstrung, and the public discussion will not occur. And this, of course, follows, it's been 4 or 5 years now since Fairview Beach was off access because of Phase 1, and, of course, Ridley Island being shut off there last summer as well. The other thing I noted in the report, looking at it this morning, is the nature of this particular environmental assessment. And it's my understanding there's about 4 different levels. This one's referred to as a screening project, which is only intended to provide a brief analysis and is used for very simple and routine projects. And the troubling part I found too was that a project justification and evaluation of alternatives, according to the various rules, is not required for this project. So this environmental assessment that will occur over the next few weeks is not required to justify the project, and it's not required to consider any other possible alternatives. And look, why is this the case? One of the reasons is the OCP, the Official Community Plan, designates the areas in industrial lands from the past. As well, the lands were historically used as a marine terminal. And last year, the port did its 2020 land use management plan, and they had a public consultation. And in that plan, it outlined potential uses for all the lands, including that as a potential marine terminal. And because the public meeting was held, therefore the public has had that discussion about what might go on there. Although last year when that was happening, there was nothing specific. It was a land use plan that the port is required to have on record, and there was nothing sort of in the offing for anybody to actually respond to. I'm sort of new to this. I did attend that meeting. It was on Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. I think there was about 5 of us in the room, and we stood around for the first hour, watched the Canucks lose, and then watched the presentation. So the technicalities with respect to this project, they're being met, but I don't think so that, there's the legal justification is there, but of course I think in terms of consultation, the moral justification is not. In reading a bit further, sorry, I only had today to look at it. According to the business plan for the Lillooet Biomass Energy Corp, the industry is really still a very early phase. It's only been going for about 10, 12 years. It's just entering a mature growth phase. And the last number of years have been characterized by a lot of technical challenges around shipping, storage, handling, dealing with the problems of off-gassing, fire. There have been charges laid. There have been people have been killed, and like I say, there's a lot of research going on, and I expect that they will find a lot of solutions to these problems over the next few years. And a quick scan of their reports really is trying to describe some technology that's going to mitigate all these things. Technology that's actually quite new and not well established. And so for us as a community to respond to this, we're kind of drawn into a bit of a technical discussion about whether this equipment and all that was actually going to work. And none of us, including myself, are experts on that kind of stuff. So to kind of sum up quickly, here is I'd like to ask Council if they would request publicly that the port extend this consultation period. In fact, actually complete that waterfront plan that Council is working with them before proceeding with this, the closure of this environmental assessment. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any questions of Mr. Shaw? Councillor Ashley.
Well, thank you for your presentation and making us aware of some of these things. I just had a question, and it's probably more for staff, but somebody else may be able to. And it's from the second page of your email. And it's the part where it says the city will be providing fire protection services to Pinnacle as part of a special reduced tax rate. What my question is if a business develops on port land, do they not then have to pay regular tax rates? It's not, like, I don't know if that's the correct way of putting that.
They do pay taxes once a development is there. It's in their lease that they do pay taxes. So
what I'm trying to just clarify is it a reduced tax rate?
No.
Okay, it's not to downplay any of the other things. I'm just trying to get, because I wouldn't be good on that.
Where a special tax rate applies is where there's port-held properties, waterfront properties that aren't developed. And there's a couple of things which I'll have Mr. Roden explain to you, but it's also called a PILT, which refers to the province, and a GILT, which refers to the federal government, where they, in legislation, pay a grant in lieu of taxes rather than pay an assessed value. But once a development does take place, there are provisions in their lease with the Prince Rupert Port Authority that they pay municipal taxes based on value. However, on some terminals, such as the coal terminal, where there are some pieces of equipment which are transportation related, those values have some change as opposed to a pulp mill or a sawmill. Mr. Roden, have you got anything to add?
Just simply, Your Worship, that you're correct that the port owns the property or controls the property on behalf of the federal government, and as such, it does not pay taxes. Instead, it pays a PILT. But His Worship is correct. When someone leases the property off the port, they do begin to pay taxes. And the tax rate that they do pay is prescribed by legislation, and it's the tax rates, the $27.50 for old port property and $22.50 per thousand for new development. And that goes under the Port Property Tax Act, which was referenced recently in the paper in the discussion of how the city receives a grant which offset from the provincial government, which offsets the city's ability to levy a higher rate of taxes against those properties. Is that clear, Mr. Shaw? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ashley.
And my second thing, it's not so much a question as more agreeing with some of the things that you've said here. I do have a concern, and I with what they talked about in terms of being a substantial period of community consultation. And there's been a few different people, including the people that presented to us from Pinnacle, but also people from the port that have said that, yes, they would make sure that they consulted with the community and got feedback before they went through as part of the environmental assessment process. And then it does concern me that it is such a short timeline. And the fact that, to be totally honest with you, even though I knew that there was going to be a date coming up for when the actual public session was going to happen, I wasn't aware of that until you actually sent the email today, even though I knew it was going to be coming up. And I realize it may have been in the paper, but it does concern me because I think that if people that are paying attention don't know, then how many other people don't know? And so I certainly do share your concern on that point. And with the other aspects of things that we do not know about in terms of certain risks. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Mr. Shaw, I can tell you that Mr. Shaw, that the city has asked to meet with the port on this, and in my discussions with the port, while they are considering meeting with the city, they say that any inquiries they get, they're encouraging people as much as possible to get involved and state their concerns and ask questions with their public process. And certainly, I don't think anybody here, understanding what you've written with regards to timelines, would have a concern asking for an extension. But I also would encourage you and anybody else as much as possible to get involved with that public process that they have going on. Are there any other questions of Mr. Shaw from members of council? Councillor Thorkelson.
Again, it's not so much of a question, Mr. Shaw, but I want to thank you very much for raising the issue. I've been trying to pay attention, as probably most of the other councillors, on what's been going on in this issue. It just seems to have nothing going on, and then now to have 3 weeks notice to get your input in is certainly problematic. So I guess my comment on this is that to understand the city's position is that as individual councillors we can go and talk, same as you can and any other person in the city can do, and I as the mayor has asked, urge people to go and show up at the 100 people showing up, tends to make the process longer. But the other problem is that we don't have any control over whether that project goes ahead or not, and we don't have the ability to zone it. We don't have the ability to stop it. It's not on our lands. We don't have the ability to have any kind of impact on that as a municipality. So what happens is that it becomes a challenge to deal with the port and talk about what kind of social license do they have, and what kind of waterfront are the people of Prince Rupert's going to support in port development, and what kind of a waterfront that the people of Prince Rupert want to see for their children and for their grandchildren, and whether that is obviously there's going to be industrial development down there, but whether there's industrial development that meets the standards that the people who are living above that development feel is going to impact on their standard of living or not. And the port hasn't talked to the city about that. In fact, in my opinion, and this is probably maybe not shared by the rest of council, or may be shared with the rest of council, but my opinion is the port has been very remiss in talking to us about how much social license that they have, and whether they should be moving forward without a development plan that is agreed to by the city. And I think I've voiced this many times. I think that it may be a development plan that says we don't want dust. It may be a development plan that says we don't want buildings more than 3 stories high. It may be a development plan that says we don't want anything that's going to encourage more rail traffic. It may be a development plan that says that there will be a proper paved road for access to something so that we don't have dust and noise of people going through potholes. So what kind of lighting there is down there, whether people are having to face lighting directly into their windows as that area of the waterfront is being developed. I believe strongly, and I have let the staff that I've met with the port know that those are my strong beliefs, and that I think that the port should not be going ahead, even though they can do it legally. They should be not going ahead without developing a waterfront plan with the city that we would be able to talk about what kinds of things would be acceptable to development in the part of the waterfront that is adjacent to residential property. So I want to say that I don't know whether Pinnacle is a good project or a bad project. I watched the two sawmills burn down, and I'm sort of I have real concern about fire along the waterfront. Concern about fire anywhere, but particularly fire along the waterfront. And I haven't read any of the material that they've produced, and I want to do that before I make up my opinion. But what I am opposed to is not having a waterfront plan that determines things like what I've talked about, the things that people will support in general for development on an in-town waterfront. And I really think that discussion needs to take place. So it's just like today we had a discussion about Seal Cove. That discussion needs to take place for the other part of that. I totally, absolutely agree with you on that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask Council's consideration of the request of Mr. Shaw to send a letter to the Prince Rupert Port Authority asking them to extend the time frame of this public process regarding the environmental assessment. Certainly. No, that's fine. It's factual information. Councillor Ashley.
I am willing to move the recommendation that we write a letter to the port asking them to extend the port and Pinnacle Pellet to extend the environmental assessment portion so that people can have an adequate time in order to express their concerns and to learn about the information. and because there was a second part to the request, that they do this. I'm trying to think how I want to word this. And that we develop a waterfront plan before they move ahead. So they work with us to develop a waterfront plan before they move ahead with it. I think, it's probably as clear as mud, but hopefully Mr. Grodecki has captured my intention. I have absolute faith.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rice. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rice.
I just wanted to reiterate something that you had mentioned, Mr. Mayor, earlier, in that to really encourage the public to actually get involved, because this is your opportunity, and should Pinnacle and should the Port decide not to extend the public consultation period, this is a screening, and in environmental assessment language, screening is the lowest level of environmental assessment. It's the easiest level of environmental assessment. It's considered something you just screen or quickly preview, and so it's pretty much a done deal. So this is your opportunity, and if you go to pinnaclepellet.com, the EA is actually up there, and it's actually, of all the EAs I've read, it's fairly digestible compared to some. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And just another comment, and it's just a general comment. I don't really know who it's for, but maybe someone could help me. Part of the problem, I think, with these types of things is the language that is used in the newspaper, because it's in zoning talk. I mean, Mr. Creckett probably understands it thoroughly, but the rest of us, it kind of, you glaze over it. It's boring. It's legal talk. But if it was something very general and in simple terms, like, hey, we want to put a pellet plant in your waterfront and there might be some dust and some noise and some trains, we want to get involved, I think people would be more involved. So it's just sort of the way we engage or choose to engage. And I just encourage maybe the Port Authority, if they're listening, to use language that is digestible for the general public. And then we might actually do better at paying attention. Thank you.
You're welcome. So how about those Canucks? Thank you. Question's been called. Those in favor? The motion's passed. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Shaw. If you've had the flu bug or whatever, I hope you're over it. Our city manager just went home on short notice because I think it's going around again, despite the fact we've got a sunny day. But thank you for coming down here.
Thank you.
We'll move on the agenda to resolutions from closed meetings. Mr. Grodecki, would you please read the resolutions to be released?
Yes, Your Worship. Council has appointed Maureen Makarenko, Diane Copperwaith, Judy Fraser, David Fisher, Michael Shaw, Shane Dydstead, and Linda Lutz to the Prince Rupert Airport Authority Board of Directors, and that Council has also appointed Mr. Frank DiBartolo to the Prince Rupert Port Authority Board of Directors.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to City Manager Outstanding Council Initiatives. The City Manager isn't here. So I think we'll go directly to reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Are there any this evening? If not, certainly, please go ahead, Councillor Rice.
Thank you. I mentioned this at the last meeting, but I guess I'll just mention it again because there is the opportunity. On the theme of the public getting engaged in potential projects that might happen in their community, I wanted to remind folks that the Enbridge Northern Gateway hearings are actually wrapping up pretty soon, and the last chance for the public in Prince Rupert to communicate their concerns, desires, wishes, likes, dislikes to the panel occurs May 24th, so that's coming up. They're here for a few days. And people that registered to actually present their concerns, and I know that there were over 200 people in Prince Rupert that did so, you actually only have 3 days left to establish a time for you to speak, to express your concerns. So there's a deadline of May 17th to actually get your timeline to present. And again, I encourage the public to, even if they haven't registered to speak, to come out and hear what people have to say May 24th to the 28th in regards to that particular project. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Thorkelson.
On that issue, is it possible, Councillor Rice, that if people are anxious to book their time but don't know how to do it, if they could give you a call and you can assist them in doing that?
Yes, I could do that. So my phone number is actually 250-624-4147. I think that's my office phone number. And they can go down to the Fish Hall, where that's my office is located, if they want to come in person. Thanks.
You're welcome. If there's nothing further, I'll give the mayor's report. I'll start as a reminder to the public that in the first couple of pages of your phone book, you will find your free tipping token for people that are cleaning up their yards and have other things they'd like to throw away. And those tokens are now being accepted for the next while, and so people are certainly welcome to use them. They are there to be used in an effort to help you clean up your properties and make the city look a little bit cleaner for the summer season. With regard to the mayor's report, I attended the Prince Rupert Minor Hockey Banquet and had the pleasure of acknowledging Frank Slabowski, a young Prince Rupert hockey player who is doing well as he's been named a freshman All-American by Inside College Hockey. Also, on behalf of City Council and the residents of Prince Rupert, I was able to present a Civic Appreciation Award to the 18 members of the Canfisco Midget Rep Sea Wolves team, who all received certificates, and their captain, Tyler Gerbov, was presented with a plaque from the city. The coaches of the team are Roger Atchison and Bart Kuntz, and the team is recognized for exemplary behavior as young ambassadors for Prince Rupert in the sport of hockey. I attended the Ridley Terminals Incorporated annual general meeting about their terminal performance in 2011 and their expansion plans into the future up to the end of 2014. Their facility will expand from 12 million metric tons yard capacity to 29 million metric tons and possibly to 30 million metric tons. I express thanks to the Board of Directors, the management, and the employees on behalf of City Council and our residents for the gifts Ridley Terminal provides to the city and the various community organizations. And one thing in particular, every year Ridley Terminals does provide a free day with regards to, it's right around Christmas time, provides a free day for youth to use all of the Civic Center, arena, as well as the swimming pool facilities. And Ridley Terminals, through their work, really does provide a spotlight on Prince Rupert as a port city. I had the pleasure of attending a retirement party for a city employee, that's Charles Trimble, and presented him with a plaque acknowledging his 33 years of service to the city of Prince Rupert in the Parks and Recreation Department. I spent the afternoon of May 1st with the Cemetery Advisory Committee members and community volunteers cleaning unwanted turf away from gravestones in the older part of the Fairview Cemetery in preparation to have the gravestones leveled. Afterwards, there was a short ceremony held acknowledging the 100th anniversary of the cemetery, and the community band was there to play music. I expressed on behalf of City Council the reasons why the council was absent, it's too bad these things are booked at the same time, but of course the council was away at the North Central Local Government Association meetings. I met with Rear Admiral Nigel Greenwood and some of his staff to review an update on Canadian naval activities. We also discussed consideration of ways in which they could possibly be an expanded presence on the North Coast involving more ships and possibly submarine visits, more involvement for youth in the Sea Cadets, and development of a Navy Reserve in the next few years. Along with 2 members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police dressed in red serge, Stetson hats, and high-top riding boots, we greeted the cruise ship passengers visiting our city. The visitors enjoyed themselves, and many of the volunteers received very positive comments about the visitor experience. On behalf of City Council, I'd like to thank all the community groups, individuals, and volunteers who helped make the day a success. We're optimistic that Holland America Line cruise ships will continue visiting Prince Rupert in the future. A lot of the visitors enjoyed the wildlife viewing, the Aboriginal dancers, and that Prince Rupert people were approachable and easy to talk with. The City of Prince Rupert and Holland America Line exchanged plaques acknowledging the visit and appreciation. And there are 3 more cruise ships scheduled to visit Prince Rupert in the month of July 2012. I attended the Seniors Pancake Breakfast, which is held as a fundraiser the first Sunday of each month during the autumn, winter, and spring. And that event is open to the public. I also attended the Tourism British Columbia New Power and Sail Cruise BC Marine Highway Sector Marketing Development Initiative. This initiative, in conjunction with the Experiences BC program, assists with the creation of provincial and industry-led tourism marketing plans with access to matching cooperative marketing funding. This initiative could support more itinerant marine vessel visits to Prince Rupert and the surrounding area. Local participants were able to provide good information to this marketing development initiative that will support an itinerant marina for vessels, which later on this year will be a consideration. The group is still researching and providing information in hopes of accessing funds. There could be 2 pockets of funding there, one from West Coast Fisheries Legacy Trust, the West Cap Initiative, and the Fisheries Legacy Trust, and there is an opportunity to also get another $250,000 from another sustainability trust fund. The city and the Prince Rupert Port Authority could then consider some degrees of participation to leverage those funds and create a development here. That concludes my report. Councillor Ashley?
Sorry, I just had one other thing.
Certainly, go ahead.
It's more of an information piece for people. I got an email. ICBC is holding a public open house asking for feedback, I guess, about basic vehicle insurance rating system because they're going through some changes. And they're going to be having an open house in Prince Rupert at the Crest Hotel on Tuesday, June 12th from 6 to 9. So I just thought I would let people know about that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rice.
My apologies. I think I'm finally done. I had one more actually announcement to make. It's in regards to soccer, and I have a dear friend from Vancouver who is going to come to Prince Rupert for the long weekend because I'm finally going to prove to her that we don't live in igloos and that the sun does shine here. But my friend is Carrie Serwetnik, and she's a former national team player for Canada as well as other countries. And she was the first woman inducted into the Canadian Soccer Hall of Fame. So she's a real star, and she's a real champ, and she's been doing soccer clinics. So at the last minute, we decided to try and organize some soccer clinics, and it looks like it's going to happen that we'll have a soccer clinic Friday evening and Tuesday. And I don't have any more details, but just to keep people's eyes peeled for that, because they're really affordable, and I've actually seen her in action in clinics and do motivational speaking, and that was initially what I wanted to get her up here for. Was she's a pretty inspiring speaker for our youth. So I just wanted to give people a heads up if they're for youth in particular and kids, if they're interested in soccer, that there'll be some soccer clinics coming up.
So that'll be this Friday and the following Tuesday.
This Friday and the Tuesday, so this holiday Friday.
Can people phone you in terms
they
of
can
signing
phone me.
up?
Well, I don't want to.
Or is there?
They
some
could phone me for the
structure being set up?
information, and I'm hoping by the end of tonight that I wrap up the people in the town, the community, the soccer folks in the community, they will take care of it because this is not my forte. I just sort of got the ball rolling.
Right.
Well,
it's very good. It's positive.
They they can contact me for more information, and I'll direct them to the appropriate soccer people in town.
Certainly. Thank you very much for doing that.
You're welcome.
If there's nothing further, I'll ask the council for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Kinney, who's thinking about it.
Yep.
Thank you. Question has been called. Those in favor. Thank you very much. This meeting stands adjourned.